Hi there. Hello there. Hi there. This is Cliff Bates, and welcome to not a Friday Livestream. As you're seeing this, I am actually not here. This is not live. This has been pre-recorded because what's going on is I am on TV, Polish TV. Um, it's not necessarily live, but it's a recorded show of a public debate in a debate. There's this kind of Warsaw debates thing that they have. They have like 4 or 5 episodes, and this is like the fifth episode, sixth episode. And the debate is going to be about, there's going to be four people, and there's even a joke about this, is, 2 men and 2 women, but pro and con against, is Trump going to make America great again? And I could just, and of course the women are Trump phobes, and like someone from Spain is going to be here, an IR person from Spain, and I'm just, they asked me to participate in this, and I'm kind of like saying, okay, this is, is America, I have, so I'm going to be on this this debate, this kind of thing, and I'm going to have to stand. Yesterday, I took a fall. I was coming out of school and going home, and I took a fall because I turned too easy. It's still dark here, 4 o'clock, 4:30, almost at 4:30, 4:45. It's still dark out here in January in Poland, and I went to the side exit near the emergency door because I prefer it's level ground floor, it's on the street level, whereas the other door, the main door, goes, you have to go downstairs, and given that the slush and the ice coming down from the buildings made me kind of like but my wife was there, she was gonna she hit the car, and she wanted to go the other way, but I wanted to go this way because I didn't want to go downstairs, honestly. But what happened was, as we left the door, I turned too quickly, and it was on the dirt. And what happened was my cane slipped, my foot slipped, and I fell, and it was a disaster. I mean, I couldn't get up. I couldn't get up. And when I tried to get myself up with the cane like this, I pulled my muscle here. It was like, oh. It was just too far to. Our car was, I would have normally rolled to a car and pulled myself up, or rolled to a garbage thing, and pull yourself up in that sense. But so she went back into the building, got a chair, and I got up. Okay, but I ripped. When I fell down, I hit it hard. I ripped this. I can't really put any pressure on, for like a decade now. I'm not able to put any pressure on the kneecap. So it was a complete, so my shoulder is like, if I do it like this, it hurt. It just pulled it, the muscles just pulled like anything. So it's, so my shoulder, my arm, forearm up here hurts like anything. The muscles like strained, pulled. And therefore I was kind of like, yeah. But tomorrow I have to do this TV thing. Okay, I'm doing it. It's important, for my department and things like this to get, attention. But this idea, you have to. I have to go up and make an introductory speech of 2 minutes. Like, but to stand, like pretend drama. It's like, no, I don't want to really stand. Honestly, to be honest with you, but I'll go stand. The point is, the question then becomes, what about the point? And I think I'm going to say, listen, we can already see the effect. Trump is going to bring back American power. Making America great again is restoring American global power, American global authority, undoing a lot of the stupid things of the past 20 years, 30 years. The past 25, 30 years that have been a disaster in American history. It's, so therefore that's going to be kind of the thing I'm doing. But I also, Monday we have to go sign my document and then have the lawyer take the report to the lawyer, so we can again appeal the committee who repeated the same decision that it did last year. It was supposed to redo it quickly, it didn't do it quickly. So the committee is just, what is that? What did Einstein say about insanity? Insanity, people who do the same thing over and over again, thinking they'll get a different result. Because I think we'll appeal the result again, and we'll appeal it as based upon that it overvalued the student evaluation and ignored the other things, and that they did this to kind of just be stubborn against the rectors. Apparently the committee decided to ignore the rector's suggestion that they were wrong or in error, and whatever. So we'll see what happens. I'm gonna just if they can't be a good committee, they should be, they're going to be in trouble again. So, and it's frustrating. And that, the little problem people, we have bureaucracy, you have to go back on the exams coming up. It's like, I have to build a new classroom. The federalism class, I'm doing a course on state and local government with federalism. But I have to build the Moodle class for it. So I'm kind of like, I have all the material, I can just do it, I just have to sit down and do it like one day. And I have over 20 papers I have to grade, 20 essays I have to grade. I got them like yesterday, and to be honest with you, I was going to do it today, but I was in no mood, I took a hit. I will probably grade them Sunday. I'll make a move to grade them Sunday, I think. But then I have to do some video recording. I've done some video recording. I have at least a week and a half of the new Machiavelli Discourses stuff, which will start like at the last week of January. The Discourses stuff. So it's the Discourses. It's starting. There'll be some will be short. Some will be 20 minutes, 30 minutes at the most, because it's by chapter. Some may be a little longer as we get to the longer chapters. So I think people will like it. The Discourses thing. We're going through the Machiavelli's Discourses. I think it's interesting in that sense. I've been getting some books. My Christmas orders started coming in. All the things I got for Christmas are finally coming in now. I got some books about Westminster because I'm kind of been studying the question of Westminster. I've been following without David Starkey, but also the someone like what's his name? Dominic Cummings had to say about the question of the broke down in Westminster, and I think in many ways Starkey's account of the historical development and the trends is one thing, but the breakdown of the bureaucratic organizational thing is a different thing, and they kind of intersect in this way, and I think this is worth looking into. Because those who are interested in British politics should understand what's broken down in it and why the breakdown is so complete. The breakdown of the British state. The British state is completely broke down. It's not only broke down; it's that we can see even by the way the labor ministries are handling things are grossly incompetent. So it's not even just the state is not capable of doing what it's supposed to do. it is simply just grossly incompetent from even the ability to do what it should do and how to do it effectively. The quality of the civil servants are poor because of wokeism. 30 years of promoting on basically social equity and diversity has produced instead of produced a whole generation of completely incompetent civil servants. So you have the utter incompetency of the civil servants mixed with the growing stupidity of the political class. So it's a kind of a clusterfuck of that's that's how marine jarheads would say it. It's a clusterfuck of incompetence and stupidity. Westminster is an important case story, and for parliamentary situations, it is a warning to those who wish to. The British first past the post style electoral system for the parliament is the only thing. It's single-member districts, first past the post, is the only thing that it kind of tends to promote majority governments, okay? And the only time when there wasn't kind of a majority government in the 20th century, 21st century, was during the Cameron government. It was the first round of Cameron, which it was done with Lib Dems. But then what happened was the second round, where Cameron wins a conservative-only government. But then he only does this by promising a referendum, which he doesn't want, but he has to promise it to ensure that enough of the disaffected Tory voters abandon UKIP and will support or abandon marginal third parties and would support or come to vote for the Conservatives. And that's how we got Brexit in that sense, right? Because what happened was then he didn't want it. He kind of hoped that they could repeat what happened with the Scottish referendum, but what ended up happening was that someone like Cummings got directed the Leave campaign, and Cummings is an outstanding manager in that sense, an outstanding organization, political manager. He's not a politician. He is not a politician. He is basically an advisor and strategist. He's a very good advisor, strategist, and kind of like an organizer. But he's not the man who you put in front of the camera in that sense. He's not that kind of person. He's not a politician in that sense. I don't think England is yet ready. England is not ready to kind of break away from their existing conception of who can be an acceptable candidate. Hence, this is why the whole Tony Robertson problem is an interesting one in England. In other words, the Americans, Elon Musk's whole tweeting about the Pakistani rape gangs, that's one thing. But the fact that he was kind of saying, listen, Tony, Elon was saying about Robinson, and getting him angry at Farage by Farage distanced himself, or reform needed. In fact, that's because the English media establishment and the key urban demographics that he needs to get in order to be able to get a majority in Parliament and win some seats, more seats than he has now. This will, you might get a situation where they will be, in other words, reform could still win, but get the most votes overall, but not win enough seats to get the Parliament. And the question is, will the Conservatives be willing to take a second fiddle? Because right now the Conservatives, all the polls look like it's a UKIP, reform / Labour around 25% tie, and that and that Tories are in third place in that sense. Where either and the trajectory is that the reform is increasing and labor is declining, and it's not going to get any better by the next week in that sense when Trump gets in the office, and the fact that the British are putting Mendelssohn, that the British government, the Starmer government is doing everything it can to kind of alienate Trump by appointing Mendelssohn as the U.S. ambassador. It was, I mean, this is, and the Tories are no better in this to alienate Trump. The Tories were as much hostile to Trump, the existing Tory establishment was as much hostile to Trump and sent ambassadors and pursued policies that basically cooperated with the anti-Trump forces to do things. The ambassador, the one-time ambassador, even validated the complete fraudulent Steele document. So, this is the mega, and much of the disaster of ESG and wokeism is as much a product of the liberal social democratic light of the Tories, not all labor, new labor. So I mean, there's the conservative what Cameron did to the conservatives was made it Me Too Blairism, and actually could try to out move. The argument is we're better than they are. We can be just as woke and just as pro-green and pro-ESG and just blah, blah, blah. But I think this is going to... students of comparative politics or British institutions are going to have a field day about this. This is a case study. So I've gotten some books, 2 or 3 books about Westminster, the Prime Minister, book by Ian Dale's book. I was waiting to hear from Starkey about the book that he's recently done, the new chapter on Henry VIII that he's done. The other thing I've been doing, I told you last week, and the thing I had the new book by, not a new book, but a new edition of this. It's a reprint. It's a reprint of Livingston's ruling class, and it looks pretty good. I've also got this because this is Democracies, the big thing. I got these 2 books. It's Stefan Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt, bestsellers. These were New York Times bestseller nonsenses. International, Penguin. It was in the U.S. It was published by Random House, and then Random House and Penguin. So in England it's Penguin, the Brits it's Penguin, but in the U.S. it's Random House. Penguin Viking in the UK, distributing in Random House in the U.S. This is the 2018 book, which became the bestseller, and this is the 2023 book, Tyranny and Minority: How to Reverse a Authoritarian Turn and Forge Democracies for All. This is what I call the democracy crowd, or democracy TM trademark. The crowd. What is so annoying about this? In many ways, this is basically both of these authors are I think technically political scientists. In this sense, they are political scientists. I don't want to say that they're not political scientists. They seem to be. They may be journalists, but let's. How come you didn't? He's an American political scientist. He's at Harvard. He's a professor governor at Harvard. So Harvard is once again showing how it's the enemy of of this. He's a degree at Stanford. Let's go look at this thing. He's American political science, he's at Harvard. As I say, Harvard is one of the most difficult schools to get in, but then students become dumber as they graduate. In other words, you will be stupider after 4 years of Harvard. Just getting into Harvard is the greatest achievement. So people people who don't finish Harvard can, just getting admitted into Harvard and never getting a degree like Bill Gates and Zuckerberg, you're just already a star. Just getting in is the hardest thing. But once you're in, you don't learn a damn thing. Okay, some students you could get. There's some teachers that you can go there. There are some very good people still around. Most of the better teachers are kind of been forced to emeritus because of woke and things like that, and they will, Dr. Fryer, the African American economist, was kind of pushed out or marginalized again because the left, because he went against their things. Is basically now Levitsky is again his degree. He was at the Kellogg Institute in '99. Joined Harvard in 2000, so he's been there since 2000. He went on in 2004. He became the Loeb Associate Professor of Social Science. He's also on the executive committee of the White House Center for International Affairs and David Rockefeller of Latin America. His specialization is authoritarianism. Okay, he studied the authoritarian phenomena under Milosevic and this. In 2018, he published with another Harvard professor, Ziblatt. He's the Eaton professor of political science at he's a German studies at Pomona at Claremont Systems, PhD from Berkeley, right? He published a book in 2018, his big book, Democracies Die, the conservative parties and the birth of democracy, 2017, about this. He is a student of democracy, democratic things. His is about securing the state, the formulation of Italy and Germany, and the puzzle of federalism, 2006. That was probably his dissertation. His conservative party, about the role of conservative parties in democracy in both England, remember that's in England and elsewhere. Now, How Democracies Die is the book he wrote with this, and he examines the conditions that lead to breakdown from within rather than external events, right? Military coups. So therefore, it's the idea of democracy breaking down. But and actually, let's even go with this. Let's repeat that the book examines the conditions that can lead democracy to break down from within rather than due to external events, right? The problem with this book, how can I say this? The problem with this book ultimately is that it's hysterical. Both of these authors are the American academic of Harvard style, who has what? Trump phobia. I mean, the real thing about this book, now I'm not going to, I'll argue that the criteria that they use, he has this criteria of what actually, he'll have these criteria, these, I think 4 or 5 criteria. Where is the criteria page again? Yeah, he'll have the he'll have the 4 key indicators of authoritarian behavior. So again, he takes the authoritarian behavior model that Levitsky is known for, and says, well, authoritarian. Now the question is, Ziblatt is the democracy theorist, and this guy is the what we call the authoritarian expert. Okay, so they're going like they're working, collaborating on all this. The problem with their criteria is like rejection of weak commitments to democratic rules of the game. Okay, yes. But if that's the case, then why isn't... Now, he hypes and cries about Trump. And this is written in 2018, so it's only the first 2 years of Trump, right? First two, not even 2 years, first year of Trump. They even admit this in this book. It's projection. It is trunk derangement syndrome and hyperventilating. They are the little boys, okay, grown men who cried wolf. Why? First, exaggeration of Trump's authoritarian thing. The problem is the misunderstanding and not understanding of the role charisma and leadership plays in democratic systems. For, hate to say it, Mr. Ziblatt's understanding of democracy is a little childish. It is process based in many ways. Now he'll write on the idea that, oh my God, Ziblatt will, if I'm correct about, Ziblatt is the guy who will argue about the growth of democracy within, for someone who should know the structuring of the state of Italy and Germany and the federalism of that period, he seems to be a comparative politics in this sense. He was the idea of the German state, the German political system. Okay, good, that's the thing. But the democracy thing, because I hate to say it, democracy comes to Germany and Weimar. Democracy is not a product of Wilhelmine Germany, okay, or even Bismarckian or Wilhelmine Germany. Yes, it is with the conservatives with what's Disraeli that you have the creation of a kind of democratic order. In other words, the Tories in England become the institution that helped bring democracy there. The question of France democracy, it's a more problematic question. I think, and that's why I someone who studies, and the question of Italian democracy, that's even more problematic, because the question was, you had a monarchy, right, with the establishment, but it was a republic. It was mostly a kind of this. World War I led to its breakdown, and the betrayal of how the Italians were betrayed by their allies, in that, and they got very little out of Versailles, and this is what led in 1919 to the rise of Mussolini. Mussolini's regime is only overturned by foreign invasion, not by anything internal. In fact, in many ways, it was this idea that Mussolini and Hitler are the same thing is a total misunderstanding of what Mussolini was. I'm told there's a miniseries about Mussolini that's out there. There's a HBO, or not HBO, but some TV miniseries about Mussolini that is out there today. Recently, I saw it on YouTube, a kind of clip of advertising it on YouTube recently. But I haven't seen much about it or even checked on it. Now, how can I do this now? Comparative authoritarianism, he looked at Argentine's, Levitsky's Argentine, Latin Americanist, Peronism, labor-based parties of this, and Peronism, right, comparative perspective, that's 2003. Argentine democracy of institutional weakness, right, this is this question of this. I think I would love to hear his attack on, what's his name, Mr. Chainsaw, the libertarian guy who's now the president of Argentina, who's kind of totally, very Trumpian character, who totally has revived the thing. So, this is the thing goes. And then 2010 is competitive authoritarianism, hybrid regimes in the Cold War, with co-authored with Lucian Way. He wrote a book, Revolution Way, again with revolutions and dictatorship, by Princeton. But then he went back with Ziblatt to do Tyranny, the authority, this. Now, the 4 criteria that he make here, let's go talk about it. He goes, the second criteria is rejection or weak commitment to democracy rules of the game. Denial of legitimate political opponents. Now, I hate to say it, Biden and crowd did more to violate that than Trump did. Okay? In many ways, it was both Clinton, whose use of the FBI and the FBI files, and that led to the backlash of impeachments against him. But that's one thing. But during the Obama years, the use of the Patriot Act and the powers of the internal to target political opposition. In other words, everything Biden did in his term, 4 years, was pre-staged by Obama. Obama used the IRS to target right-wing groups, the political conservative opposition, the cooperation, the complete capture of the media, the complete media capture in this. In other words, in many ways, again, he says another thing is toleration or encouragement of violence. Come on, Antifa? Where are you? Antifa, is that kind of a right-wing organization? Oh, but Antifa doesn't exist. No. I mean, the riots in 2020, that really... Oh, but the Patriot Front, in other words, there is kind of a hypocrisy by these Harvard professor types who are among their little bubble, and they're so inside, their asses are so inside their head, inside of a bubble of self-think, of groupthink, collective groupthink, that they don't understand reality anymore. That's why they're silly. This is the problem with this book, that even if you can agree with the criteria, and I think that there is legitimacy of the understanding the criteria of authoritarianism, and how authoritarianism destroys democracy. But hey, go back to the Ziblatt's idea about how the conservatives are responsible for democracy in the 19th century. And what was so hard about comparing Trump, this idea of, what happens is it's called the progressive left mindset that these academics totally are brainwashed by. And therefore they're so possessed by this progressive ideology, they no longer can discern reality. In other words, when their side does something bad, oh no, I'm looking. In other words, they assume intent of the parties, that the intent of the Republicans and those on the opposing them are bad, and therefore are the enemies of things, and therefore anything that they say or exaggerate. Trump will say certain things, but then they'll read. In other words, Trump will say things basically ironically. Trump uses wit and sarcasm and exaggeration for effect. Why? Because he understands the power of it. He's mocking the kind of 20, 30 years of this kind of political culture where you're so afraid to take a position. Therefore, your political people have this tendency to promise, lie to you in promises, but then never deliver what they really mean. Never tell you what they really want to do. They will tell you what you want to hear, and then to get elected. And once you get in office, they do the opposite. Okay, and this is both parties in this does this. This is not unique for this. Is that undemocratic? Yeah. So therefore, the question is, what is democracy? The criteria he does here is authoritarianism. What is the criteria? So his argument is, if there's in other words, authoritarian democracy, The claim of this work is authoritarian and democracy are opposed. Whoa. Can there be an authoritarian democracy? Yes. Authoritarianism just means what? It means, the problem is authoritarianism here means anti-democratic in this thing. This is his idea. Therefore, but then he defines the anti-democratic position as being what? Again, let's go look at the 4 criteria, right? Rejection, a weak commitment to democratic rules of the game. Okay, so democratic rules of the game. Stopping, interfering with democracy, changing rules, like the idea you're not going to have ballot protection or no ID, voter ID. Well, because you cannot go. Oh, wait a minute. You're making people have voter ID. That is anti-democratic. Really? Having safe voting, in other words, having very fraudulent voting things is anti-democratic. This is one of the critiques. If you go look at the OECD and the International Development Organizations, looking at the rules of how you need to conduct elections, the 2020 U.S. election would fail those rules, given the criteria of what they do. Okay, you have to understand, America is actually, because of local constructions of elections and the way political parties control the elections, and particularly big urban democratic political machines, who then kind of refuse to have clean the ballot slates, compete the voter rolls, allow for tampering of ballots. Everyone knows that this happens in big political machines. Now, it's not like it's. In fact, we can say it was this time that the amount of people voting for Trump was just too big to rig, and therefore the machine couldn't. And because there was so much targeting and media attention because of X. In other words, you can, in 2020 you can get away with what they did because there was no media platform that would allow, in other words, any Twitter, Facebook, Google, all silenced videos that would reveal that in fact, not only that, it silenced the videos that showed the bad behavior of the police in this January 6th operation, with the overwhelming use of flashbangs and things targeting the protesters. In other words, in many ways, some people can argue that the police, by their use of pellet weapons and pellet tear gas, randomly just opening fire with pellet gas and tear gas canisters, and then flashbangs. The amount of I think hundreds of flashbangs were used in that against the protesters. And at least one other, of course, Ashley, the one woman was shot. There was no policeman was killed, or at that. They They committed suicide. One died of a stroke afterwards. In other words, no one. Maybe one policeman was involved in a scuffle and was hurt, but more protesters were physically assaulted, harmed by police. In other words, there was, the accounts of January 6th are skewed. I watched January 6th live stream, by live stream events through things, Gab and other sources. This is why the Biden and the deep state did was they pressured Amazon to take off Parler off their servers. This is why Gab had to abandon Amazon to get its own servers. In other words, in other words, the Democratic Party, the Allies, and the permanent civil service, the deep state, you call it, collaborating with the anti-Trump forces in the Republican Party, who are in the Senate and the House. These people wanted to fundamentally put pressure on social media to shut critique down. The difference between 2020 and 2024 was Elon Musk buying Twitter, and Twitter no longer participating. Twitter revealing the interference by the Biden political machine and the Democrats on social media. Now, Mr. Zuckerberg is trying to change sides and win favor of Trump. Trump should basically start targeting Meta. Whoever is the next Department of Commerce guy, they should trust bust Treasury or that. They need to bust up Meta. Instagram and that. Now, I even don't think Elon Musk should be allowed to buy. Even though I like Elon, I don't think he should buy TikTok. And someone else needs to buy TikTok if it's going to be done, or it should be. I think TikTok should be killed as a Chinese. The Chinese should not be allowed to own or operate TikTok. In fact, I would even say Haywire should not be allowed to be sold anywhere. In other words, it should be in other words, the Chinese cannot be trusted with anything digital, because the PLA is in charge. Any Chinese company is controlled by the PLA. I don't care if it's even in Indonesia, it is still controlled. If it's a Chinese company, Chinese ethnicity, it is controlled by the PLA, because the PLA, that's how the PLA wants. And the PLA and their minions are going to use the capital instruments for advancing their cause, and that is to the growth of it. They're a party state. Now, remember that it is an authoritarian party state. But back to the idea that, oh my God, this is like this. The Biden administration interfered with media, remember the other criteria they say, denial of legitimacy of political opponents. I'm sorry, I remember how the main media referred to Tea Party people as teabaggers. And the media marginalized. The mainstream media Goebbelized, in a Goebbels-esque demonization of this, the Tea Party. In other words, you had that television media, cable media, a newspaper, all the establishment newspapers, all had a single party line that agreed with the Democrats that the Tea Baggers are authoritarian. In other words, the idea of the Tea Party movement. And what happened was all the academics started, they're parrots. The academic world is a shut world that whatever the New York Times says is true. In other words, we make fun of rednecks, but rednecks have more, in other words, they have their own assholes. They have their own opinions. The intellectual university crowds may have assholes, but they don't have their own opinion. That's the famous joke. What's the difference between asshole? There's a famous saying that every opinions are like assholes, and that everyone has one. The problem they differ from assholes is that not everyone has their own. Most intellectuals do not have their own opinions about a lot of things, about political things. They live in the bubble and they don't understand it. Now, this is why this book becomes laughable at a certain level. The next criteria was the toleration of the encouragement of violence. I have a criteria. Why isn't free media feedback? The repression or controlling of information. Silence. Crickets, crickets, crickets. Authoritarian regimes control information. It's not about just mere democracy. It's the manipulation and controlling of media. And that there becomes a monopoly of information controlled by the state or its party. crickets, crickets, because these clowns want control of the media. They look at these clowns. Look at the day when the old days when there was a mainstream media and everything was wonderful in the world. Then the cable news had to destroy the nice liberal Walter that world of Walter. Oh, come on, concrete. I don't say concrete. Cronkite. Those Vietnam is lost. That's the way it is. No, it ain't. That's the joke people scream. No, it ain't. At Cronkite. Then not Mike Wallace. There was the other one. Oh, come on. Dan Rather not. He's a joke. Peter Jennings at ABC, right? These Tom Brokaw. These were the voices. They all had the same opinions. They're political. The three major networks: ABC, NBC, CBS, all had a kind of mainstream liberalism, a New Deal progressive liberalism as their things. They were sons of Edward Murrow at CBS. You had a couple of them kind of be more kind of conservative, but a couple of them kind of more. There was what's the guy? It was at ABC. First that Brinkley and the other guy name, and then the ABC original host of the 1960s was kind of a conservative voice, but then he was driven out by the younger Peter Jennings. The idea, even Peter Jennings, British, he was still seen to be more consistent with the progressive voices that were coming from Brokaw and Rather. What did them in was cable news, right? Cable news, the rise of cable news. Why? Because 24-hour news. Because originally, under the old networks, in other words, they didn't break new news. They just reported what the newspapers did. The newspapers did the serious work. Watergate was because of the Washington Post. The Pentagon Papers, New York Times, right? These are the New York Times, Washington Post. In other words, these are the papers were the real source of news. They were the one who were reporting, and yes, they would have morning editions and their evening editions, right? Morning editions, maybe a midday edition, and an evening edition, right? Most papers at that time, but usually one time a day, the morning paper. Then they had evening editions, but most times as the cost of as inflation happened and prices goes up, and the price of paying for professional journalism made it less and less likely that you could have multiple issues of a paper. That's a whole discussion about that. But the rise of Ted Turner and CNN in the late 1980s, early 90s, what does that did? With 1988, 87, CNN, Ted Turner, News Center, then created CNN. And CNN in the 1980s was important because why? 24-hour news. They broke news. This forced this. Therefore, they competed. Whereas the other network channels relied on print media for their work, and just kind of repackaged and resold print media stories for the television. CNN did live news. So that therefore you have to understand the nature of media. Then what happened was in the late 90s, mid-90s, internet came in, and the internet listservs and distribution things, like list panels where there'd be mail with, you get a mail with all the links of the story. This is what Drudge Report was, right? It was kind of first it was an email list of things being sent to people with news stories and links to news stories, to web-based news stories. Then it was a website. It was then a website that hosted that day's websites and previous day's news stories. This became a host of them, and the most Dredge was one of the more successful ones. It was basically a link to other news stories that were done. Newspapers had to go online to simply do it. To compete with cable, and to, but at the same time, because it was like this, and you paid it free. Often you couldn't advertise. It was hard to advertise. Bulk normal advertising wasn't really that effective in terms of email, in that sense that they couldn't charge subscriptions. If they charge subscriptions, that they still do, newspapers do, then they don't get read. Their sources get read only by the people who subscribe. But those who offered free stuff would allow that to get mass return and get attention to newsstand. So therefore, the nature of online internet came into the thing, and that started competing with even CNN. All right, remember it was Drudge who broke the Monica Lewinsky scandal, right? And a lot of other things. It was Breitbart who brought some scholar problems of other things. And we must remember that Tea Party was a creation of CNBC, a CNBC morning call, where they, what's his name? I forget. Zaccarelli. I forget his name. His famous speech, which starts the name Tea Party, was that famous speech in the Chicago. What is that? It's not the stock exchange. It's Chicago. It's basically where they do goods, futures, the futures, and okay, I'm forgetting the Chicago name. It's where where futures for produce, not produce, but food, grain, production products, bonds regarding not bonds per se, but futures for you name it. Housing, I think even housing was kind of done to that to some degree. Chicago Board of Trade, I think it was called. So this leads us to this book. And this book is a little better. In some ways, it's more historical. It's about the problem of the tyranny of the minority, the idea that authoritarian governments are, and that that democracies, modern democracies, have a tendency to have elite or minorities or interest groups or things like this tend to do this. Now, I haven't finished reading this book, but it is basically saying it's a warning about right-wing efforts to undermine the very foundations of the American political system. Multiracial democracy is something few societies have ever achieved. So therefore, it should be the thing everyone achieves. Okay. Again, this is what I say. The problem with both these books and these two authors, and the academic mindset of this, is that they take they take the authoritarian critique. What is authoritarian? But they don't even give a full critique of the authoritarian model. They give one that's very selective, that's perfectly designed to fulfill their argument that Trump, in other words, it's ad hoc. It's bad social science. This is kind of like an example of, this is, name a person and I'll find you the crime. This is bad social science. And again, Harvard University is the place where science goes to die. Science goes to die. This is why this is a joke. This is why this is kind of sad. Why have to spend money on this? Because I have to read it because I'm going to get students who write things like this. People are going to say, "Oh, this is a best-selling book, and therefore this might have something useful to say." No, it does. I mean, at one level, it does say some things that are true. But in another things, it exaggerates, it projects, it ignores a lot of things. It it's selective in its mechanism of criteria. What's authoritarian? It has an inadequate understanding of what is democratic. One of the big problems here is we assume it basically has no clear definition of democracy. You think, oh my God, we should have a clear definition. Well, we know what democracy is. Democracy is what us right-thinking individuals think it is. Usually these right-thinking individuals are the most anti-democratic. This is why when I looked at this book, I was scared. Because there is a tendency now. There's this idea that is being pushed by many in Europe, and people like Tom Bingham, the father of Blair's legal system in England, and the creation of the Supreme Court, and the way this is the intellectual theorist of law, the idea of the rule of law, which is what the rule of law means. It's law against democracy. Again, this I think David Starkey has done a very good job pointing out that Bingham's idea, his famous speech at Cambridge, that this is the expansion of this book, that this book is a clear account of the perversion of legal system, Anglo-Saxon, the common law model, the pre-existing common law model, that was the English model based from Anglo-Saxons, a little bit of a combination of the Norman centralization of power, Anglo-Saxon norms mixed with this Danish conceptions of writ from the Danelaw, merged together under and mollified together under Norman rule, which then was too excessive. That then Magna Carta put restraints and limits on, and then the evolution and devolution, the evolution of royal power under Magna Carta to set up the situations of the courts, and the establishment of law, and the establishment of parliament, right, and the creation of and all of them under the crown, okay. And I think Starkey does a good job. But now what Bingham does is Bingham reformulates law in a way that it's, in other words, what is this? That it's no longer, in other words, it's the rule of law is to protect minorities. It's basically liberal democracy on steroids. Liberal democracy always is, democracy literally means the rule of the majority. But the problem with majority rule, it can be tyrannical, right? Tyranny of the majority. So liberal democracy sought ways to restrict the majority from engaging in majority tyranny, but while still preserving the majority's right to rule. What progressivism did was it sought to kind of give the minority a check or a veto over, and then later even assert that the purpose of the rule of law is to counter majority rule, and to basically protect the interests of minorities and their rights. Now, the only way you can do this is by oppressing the majority, and I think, and therefore, Bingham lets it out of the bag that democracy may need to be sacrificed in order to preserve minority rights. So you have to burn the village to save it. We're going to save democracy. We have to stop, prevent democracy. Now you see some of this stuff in Poland right now under the Tusk government. You see this already in Germany. All this talk about maybe we have to ban AfD before the election, because it looks like after Musk's intervention and the Musk with Twitter and his interviewing of the AfD political parliamentary leader, a nice blonde lesbian, a libertarian, hardly a Nazi. In fact, her argument was that Hitler was a socialist, okay, and we're not socialists. What that did is that AfD is massively improving in popularity because of this. Because what Musk did was to kind of bypass, because if you go in Germany and German media is as bad as American media. It is all controlled by the establishment media types who all say the right things, and of course assert that AfD means the rise of Nazism, the rise of the far right extremism of the AfD. If the rise of AfD is a threat to democracy, again, clown word people like these, okay? Anne Applebaum, who's neocon, to what degree she's Jewish? Yes, she's Jewish ethnically, but I doubt she's a practicing Jew. What practicing Jew would marry what devout Jew would marry a Catholic like Sikorsky? Okay. Now the question and allow her children to be raised. I think they're Catholic. The children are. So. So one questions her religiosity. She's an intellectual. She's a New York kind of, not New York, but she's a Jewish intellectual by a neocon variety, who just hates all. They have there is this kind of, among these kind of Jewish or Jew, those who come from an ethnic Jewish background, who are even on the right, or even on the center right, or pro-capitalist or neoliberal, or whatever you want to call it, even they have a fear of populism. It's the fear of the Goyim, right? It's the peasants are revolting. Populism is the idea of the peasants coming up, and that of course the peasants are all anti-Semitic. This is even marked in the 1960 article. I think it was 1960 article on the authoritarianism of the working class by what is it? Lipset, 1959 article in American Sociological Review. Democracy and the working class authoritarianism, right? And then this is then again repeated in Working Class Authoritarianism, a re-examination of Lipset thesis by the European Journal of Political Research. In 2003, Lipset and authoritarian. Again, this is like this. Lipset's argument, the 1959 article. This again. Remember, we have to remember Lipset's famous article about the role of the middle class. That was the working. In other words, you can't democracy if the kind of democracy that the only democracy that's stable and good is middle class democracy. What is middle class democracy? Urban, educated, professional. Urbanized, professional, educated. Okay, that is the classes of this. The peasant, the working classes are uneducated. They're not professionals, and they're urbanized also. So that's the thing. The problem with the rural peasant, the farmers, is that they are uneducated also, and they're the worst. They're the most reactionary. These can be dangerous too. The urban ones can be, but this is the ghetto classes also. There is this aspect. This is why certain aspects of Jewish thinking looked at the urban black vote as problematic, as a threat. This is what neoconservatism kind of saw in that sense. This is this idea of the goyim and the peasant and the threat to it. We can say a lot about this. This is why there's a whole idea. This goes back all the way to Seymour Martin Lipset. Famous pieces on this. In the 1959 I think it's his famous book Political Man, right? why am I mentioning this? Because this is in a lot of ways what this is. This is a redoing of this is basically Lipset 2.3.0. Lipset 3.0. And we have to basically understand it for what it is. My problem with this, I mean, this is too historical. It goes into my first reading of this. It again goes into the historic of an understanding of things. It talks about the question of, oh my God, the Republicans are trying to prevent African Americans and by their restrictions and making like voter ID and things like that. Again, these are shallow, silly, bad faith arguments. Shame on them. I mean, but you're not reading my book fairly. I mean, the problem with this is it is so heavy-handed and so selective in their thing. It is hypocritical in that sense. It doesn't critique the Democrats and how they behaved in the last 4 years as authoritarian. Turns a blind eye to that. That's the hypocrisy of it. It will turn a blind eye to what progressive and neoliberal forces in Europe are doing to democracy. They turn a blind eye to what the EU establishment did with the Irish referendum. When the Irish voted against something, they were forced to vote over and over again till they got the right answer. Right? You're not allowed to say no. You understand? This is the neoliberal progressive idea of democracy. You can vote, but you can only say yes. If you don't like the vote. Like what happened in Romania, when the party that got elected didn't like it. The EU and the neoliberal institutions, and the court, which is an institution of this Bingham view of law, overthrew the EU bureaucrats. Twisted the arms of the court, and the court, the judges are often party. In the post-communist elite, often what happened was the court was still controlled in most post-communist countries by the old party apparatchiks, the lawyers, the professional class, who were children of the apparatchiks. And much of this is civil law models. Remember, most of Central Europe still operates under their civil law models, and therefore they are what? It's judge-based law. It's judge-based rules. There's no juries. There's judge-based structures. There's not an adversarial court. The court is a elite group that has a permanent interest, that often has an interest tied to that, and rules and does not separate. It is not a neutral arbitrator, but rather the principal investigator of truth, and they determine facts of the case, and not only the facts of the case, they also they determine facts and also make a ruling. They're not neutral arbiter as the common law model requires, and therefore what ends up happening in these models is that these courts have an interest. They have a specific economic interest, who then that economic interest is tied to the interest of the EU and the EU institutions, and therefore they will side with the EU bureaucracy and the EU elite against those of their own people. This is something that even Montesquieu wrote about. What saves England from this problem as juries? Because why? Juries are ad hoc bodies who don't, after the case is ended, they cease to exist. So therefore, they're not, in other words, who makes the decision about life and death or rulings on what is the rulings are not a group of people who has a permanent interest. Okay, understand? This is that famous chapter in England. Why is liberty preserved in England? Juries. not because of division of powers. People misunderstand that chapter. I think even Starkey misunderstands Montesquieu in this regard. He thinks Montesquieu's champions that in that chapter he thinks, well, because it's about the name of this is I think book 6 or no book 11 chapter 6. A Spirit of the Laws, where he says the title of the Constitution of England. So therefore you assume it's about the Constitution of England, but no, it's about separation of powers. And that the Constitution of England is said to be, in the earlier chapter, is the only Constitution of liberty, right? It is the liberty. So what is it, what people misread it, thinking that, that English Constitution of liberty is the division of powers. No. It's the division of powers is to understand where the liberty comes from. And the liberty comes not from the division of powers, which England does not have, but rather the jury system, where the fact that they are not a permanent class. Okay, your judges are only neutral arbiters. They're not the decider. The decider is a jury, and the jury only comes together ad hoc, and it ceases to ad hoc. So, why did I spend all day today on my not Friday live stream? Maybe it should have been a book show about these two books and about things. Well, because I think this is where someone like Pajorsky comes into the thing, and is why bother elections. But the Pajorsky thesis is what is really important about democracy is elections. That we have the people and the majority will vote out. In other words, elections are determined by the majority. That they are either, in other words, and that you have the election, which allows the process of the election. It's not perfect. Elections are not perfect. In fact, Pajorsky does kind of address his answer responding to the epistemocrats, like Jason, what's his name, Bremen, by arguing that you have elections are in other words. And any attempt to basically try to remove parties from being able to go seek election is, and then the banning of parties, or currently what the current PO government is doing in Poland is threatening to nullify the election, like happened already. The European and the courts did in Romania, or the court nullifying candidates, like it does in Russia, right? But it kind of act, in many ways you see this in the Germans. The court tries to nullify political parties. The German Constitutional Court tried to do this as a way. This is part of the legacy of Nazism, right? They use certain parties because of the fear of Nazism. We're going to give the court the ability to ban parties. That's anti-democratic. But again, the fear of the rise of Hitler was not authoritarianism. It was democratic. This is why. Democracy is a two-edged sword. They want to turn. They only want the good. They only want to focus on the false understanding of the kumbaya democracy, and then accuse everything that is not that as non-democracy. That's simply just bad faith. That's changing the definition. The bad science, bad argument, bad research. So this is why, my wife said to me, don't call them silly. They're silly. They're silly scholars. They may be professors at Harvard, but they're silly. These two books, the best-selling books, are, it's just hard to read them because it's their bias and their tone. There's not their condescension and their arrogance and their the kind of biased presentation of evidence. It's sloppy science. It's okay, but these are popular books. Okay, so they're not science. Trust me. These people get respected for that because of their books. So no, I think this is a shame. I think actually that these people should probably lose their jobs. I mean, I wish there was reviews. I wish honest political scientists would say the truth about these books and what is done in these books, and show them to be the crap they are. Because there's lots of this crap. There's a whole industry of books like this. Of, oh my God, democracy. What is it? What is the book by Applebaum recently? Applebaum. What was the book about Applebaum recently? Yeah, Aristocracy Inc., right? Her 2020 book was Twilight of Democracy, where she was going like this. I mean, I can look at her Gulag 2003, and it's not original scholarship. She just repeats what other people said. And the Red Famine, which is, again, a repeat of conquest. She's kind of, a repeater of conquest. Not really a original thinker in that sense. She's a journalist who just repeats what conquest did. What I would even argue here is this is Sikorsky's new book, 2024. Is this basically kind of us, again, that, oh my God, there's this whole industry of autocratic things, and it's global. We see this in a lot of these things in that sense. This is idea. This is why, again, people who knew her back in the 90s now look at her and they say, oh my God, what happened to her? Why is she such a anti-Trump phenomenon? Problem is, and she's not a historian, she's a popular historian. She is not her own research. She works off of the work of other people, both Red Famine and that. Other, again, conquest, Gulag, Solzhenitsyn, and the other historians, and then the Red Famine. Hold on. Okay, hold on. Like this. Well, we're going to end today on this. As my warning, my wife saying, it's time to finish up. So please, if you've liked the video, hit the like button. If you didn't like it, don't hit the like, but say why. Share on social media if you liked it. Share it about. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. Follow me on social media, links below. Follow my academic social media about me as a scholar and a researcher below those social media links. And if you want to help me financially, you can do so through Subscribe Star, Patreon, or buying one of the books listed below. Again, I hope all of you had a good day. I hope we will see you again in next week when we'll be back to live stream. So take care and have a good day. Bye-bye.